Before we get started today, I want to take just a brief moment and tell you about John Maxwell's upcoming Live to Lead event on October 8th in Atlanta, Georgia. The Maxwell Company refers to this event as their Super Bowl of leadership content. I am honored to be among the speakers that day alongside Ed Milet, Valerie Burton, Jamie Kern Lima, and the always legendary John Maxwell himself. Visit L2LATL.com for more information and to get your ticket. That's L, the number 2, LATL.com. I hope to see you there. What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Mark Steffe, President and CEO of First Command Financial Services, which provides personal financial coaching to 290,000 military families with more than 175 offices around the world. Mark is a firm believer that profitability should be the outcome, not the driving force. What's his driving force? Serving the families who serve our country. When he is not in Fort Worth, Texas, coaching one of his 5 kids' sports teams, Mark is visiting military installments around the world to ensure First Command's mission meets their needs. I have my notepad ready, and I hope you do too.
If you find yourself in a fair fight, you haven't planned your mission properly. Very few people are going to succeed on talent alone. It's going to take something beyond talent. It's great that you have it, but how do you maximize that? And how do you really differentiate yourself? And how do you push that forward? That's through hard work. That's through preparation. The training should be harder than the fighting. Preparation should be harder than the game, because you go into those games or you go into your situations as prepared as you can be.
Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I was studying and reading some of the research notes about your time in high school, Genesco High School. You were a 3-sport athlete there: track, football, basketball. Now, today in our world, we're constantly telling kids, be one thing, play it all year long. What advantage do you think you gained as someone who moved season to season, got into a different sport, and actually had to kind of work and learn and do things that you might not have otherwise thought you were going to be doing?
That's a great question. And in my humble opinion, that specialization, especially as early on as people are trying to get kids to specialize these days, is a mistake. And I thought I benefited a lot from being able to play multiple sports. You have to learn new skills. You build different muscles. You've got to prepare differently. You've got to work differently with people. You've got to think differently. Sometimes I was more of the leader if I was maybe more skilled in a sport, and other times others were probably in a leadership role, and you had to learn how to be a good follower of those leaders. It made me more well-rounded. It made me understand different challenges, different situations. And like many companies, we're going through a pretty significant transformation ourselves. We're trying to become a much more agile, nimble, sense and respond sort of organization, because we think the world these days dictates that. And that requires all of us to learn a new skill set. I've been in this business 30 years, and I can tell you this last year or 2 years has been a really steep learning curve, trying to lead through a pandemic, trying to understand this transition we're making at the company. We're all in this together. Not every situation is the same. Not every person is the same. And if you try to apply the same leadership or management style to every situation, we've got to remember communication is 2 ways. It's not just what's delivered, but it's what's received. And if people aren't receiving your message or they don't understand it or it's not compelling to them, you're not going to get the sort of action or reaction from them that you want. To really treat each situation differently, to understand what each person needs and try to tailor your approach so that that message is effectively received and acted upon as possible is critical.
I love it.
Yeah. There's a story I use a lot at the company around my oldest son. When he was younger, he was a pitcher. And I'm biased, but I thought he was a good pitcher when he was in Little League. And as good as a pitcher he was, there was a time in any game where Jack could not find the strike zone. He's just throwing the ball all over the place. We've all been there if you've been to a kid's baseball game, that inevitably some parent in the stands, and in order to be helpful, will yell out, "Hey, Jack, throw strikes."
That's so helpful.
Right.
Because Jack was intending not to throw strikes.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure.
So I told Jack, tell you what, if the next time you hear that, you tuck your glove underneath your arm, turn to the stands and say, "No kidding, I'll give you $100." Jack knows the game. He's a competitive kid. He knows the goal is to throw strikes, try to get the batters out. He gets it. But if Jack's not throwing strikes, it's just not because he doesn't care to throw them or he doesn't want to throw them or he doesn't understand that's the intent. Something's wrong with his mechanics, right? What he doesn't need is a coach or a parent saying, "Throw strikes." He needs his coach to get out of the dugout, call timeout, walk out to the mound, and help him adjust his mechanics, because that's what's going to make a difference. Without being a micromanager, that's not the goal. Just telling people to throw strikes or just telling them to go do better isn't enough. Sometimes you got to get in there, roll up your sleeves, sit down beside them, and work through the problem with them. And what is kind of particularly pleasing for me, you'll hear different people in the company at different times say, "Hey, throw strikes," right? And they get it. Like, hey, this might be the time where we got to just stop telling people what to do and really help them figure out how we're going to solve this problem. Telling them to do better, sell more, deliver more, give us better results. They all want to do that. If they're not doing a better job, it's because they need some help figuring out how to do a better job. And I think as a leader, roll up your sleeves, get your hands a little bit dirty, and help people get to a better place, not just tell them get to a better place.
How long did it take you to have to pay him that $100?
He never did it. And I wish he would have. It would maybe make for a better story, but I don't think he thought I was serious. I think he was a little shy, but it was always fun for me to joke around with him. And he's off to college now, so we're in a different place, but it's a fun memory for sure.
I love it. I know in high school, both your basketball and your football teams were coached by Ron Clary, right? Same coach. Was there something about his communication style? I mean, when you're talking about communication, what you learned then, is there some of it you apply today? Are there things you learned then that you won't do today? Because a lot of times some of the best learning are things that we see and we go, I couldn't carry that off.
We're going way back with Mr. Clary. I haven't thought about him in quite some time, but he was our head sophomore football coach and an assistant coach at the varsity level. He coached basketball as well. And he was actually one of our math teachers, like algebra or pre-calculus or something. And he was the same guy no matter what environment he was in. So if he was on the football field or the basketball court or in a classroom, he wasn't a tall or big guy, but he had this presence about him that was always bigger than his physical size. When I started thinking about him, what immediately came to mind was his passion he had, whether it was academics or whether it was athletics. He had this fire about him. He had this passion about him. He was all about getting it done, no excuses. If the math was hard, figure it out. If the play was hard, figure it out. And it wasn't that he was uncaring. It's just that he brought out the best in his students or his players, because he just didn't allow you to shy away from a challenge. He didn't let you make excuses. Frankly, with him, you always felt that he was right there with you. He wasn't asking you to do something that he wouldn't have been willing to jump in and do himself.
What a powerful leadership lesson that is.
Yeah, it goes a long way.
Yeah. In basketball, you were the best rebounder in the county. And we know rebounding is about desire. Did you set out to want to be a really good rebounder? Was that an important piece of what you saw as your contribution to the team?
I did. And I knew I could score. I was never going to be one of those 30-point a game kind of scorers, but I probably averaged 10 to 15 points a game. I knew from not only from my own contribution to the team, but for what our team needed, that rebounding and playing good defense were always going to be a part of that. And it's something I did focus on. when I played, I always remember having sort of in addition to the game plan itself, I always had two goals or ideas in mind, kind of a game within a game. One, I wanted to get as many rebounds as I could. And the other one is I wanted to hold the guy I was guarding from scoring. The goal was 0 points. I wanted to stop them from scoring the entire game. It's pretty simple. If you don't give them a second chance and you can keep them from scoring, winning the game gets a whole lot easier, right? You don't have to put up 90 points in a game to win. I do think anyone can shoot and everyone has the opportunity to score. But as I said, we knew we weren't going to put up a huge score every game. We had a bunch of hardworking kids and talented kids, but there were a lot of teams more talented than us. And we needed a more complete game than that. And that carries through today. It's not about getting the glory. And we've seen all the quotes, if you're out for the glory, you're not going to achieve nearly as much. And there are numbers of those types of quotes. It's all about getting the job done, playing good defense, rebounding, and then trying to score where scoring made sense for me was my way of contributing more completely to the game. And that work ethic is something I still think benefits me today because, as you said, it's a lot of desire and hard work. It doesn't come naturally, but you don't have to be the most athletic. You don't have to be the tallest. You don't have to be the fastest. I mean, if you look at some of the rebounders I really liked, you may not love them as a player, but if you look at a Charles Barkley or Dennis Rodman, I mean, what are they clocking in at 6'6", 6'7"? They were consistently
Fierce.
yeah, leading rebounders, right? And it had nothing to do with their size. It had everything to do with just flat out desire, and they were going to outwork you, and they did.
I loved it when he was in college at Auburn. Charles's nickname was the round mound of rebound.
Exactly.
And I always thought
Exactly.
that was pretty classic. But again, what a great lesson into your business and your professional career that yes, there are lanes that might get more glory. There are lanes that might get more attention. But if you know that this is what the team needs, go do that. You have the opportunity one day, maybe to even become CEO. Pretty awesome.
Exactly.
Your senior year, the team finished 11 and 14. I know that was an improvement from previous seasons, but you're still losing more than you're winning. And that's never fun.
No, it's not. It's not at all.
I seldom talk to people who go, gosh, that was just the greatest year of my life. Those 14 losses were incredible. But something good had to come from them. I mean, you had to learn a lesson from that window that would probably shape you as you moved on, especially in the corporate world. How did it impact you?
In a number of different ways. The first one is maybe the most obvious is you just can't quit. You never know what the next game is going to bring. And could that be the game that turns things around? Is that going to be one more win or one more victory for you? So you've got to show up ready for the next game. You can't dwell on last night's loss or last week's loss. You got to get that behind you and focus on the job at hand, right? And in that case, winning the next game. And I think you learn a lot more through tough times than good times. I've been in the financial services industry for about 30 years now. And I can tell you, when I look back on the tough times, 2000, 2001, when the markets were in trouble because of the dot-com boom, 2008 with the financial crisis, 2020 with the pandemic, I've probably learned 10 times more during tough times than you do when things are all going your way. You've got to be willing to adjust your approach and understand what you're trying to accomplish, what kind of team you have, what kind of skills they have. Because if you keep losing and you keep doing the same thing over and over, I mean, it's that old definition of insanity, right? So
Right.
you've got to be able to step back and assess your situation and say, hey, what we're doing isn't getting us the results we're achieving. So what do we have to change in order to set us up or give us the opportunity to be more successful than maybe we have been in the past? So there's all sorts of things. I wish the record was better, but the silver lining of that is you learn a lot of things that you can hopefully carry forward through the rest of your career.
Well, certainly. I mean, in financial services, you hear no more than you hear yes.
Right.
So I guess 11 and 14 may not look that bad if you were on 25 sales calls. But this idea of taking those failures, if you will, and handling them with grace. I love the way you kind of put that. Is there an example of someplace maybe in your work world where something didn't go quite as well and you really made sure the team thought, how do we make sure that we are going to handle this with grace? We're going to learn from it. We're going to get better. We're not going to continue to do the same thing over and over again.
It's not so much that there was a loss, but this global pandemic has been a lesson for all of us. And it was all about maybe preventing loss or persevering in the face of an unprecedented challenge that none of us had ever thought about before. I know in our disaster recovery plan, there is a piece in there that talks about in the event of a global pandemic, this is how we'll respond. And I remember looking at that thing saying, what are the odds we're ever going to have a global pandemic, right? We're never going to need that. But thank God we've got a team of folks that thinks through those things and had us prepared. I was two and a half months into being the new CEO of First Command when I'll never forget Friday, March 13th, we sent our 600 home office employees to work from home. Whether you're in the field with our advisors or in the home office, we have a very tight culture and our interactions are very personal, very intimate. Our financial advisors work face to face, knee to knee with the majority of our clients. We're on the way to trying to do things a lot more electronically, a lot less paper. Hadn't made that transition fully by the time the pandemic hit. And it called our entire business model into question overnight. How are you going to push paper when you can't meet people? How are you going to continue to serve our clients in an environment where you can't meet face to face? So it forced us to step back and really assess the situation and be real thoughtful, real quick about what needed to be done. What could we do to put the right tools into the hands of our field force as fast as we possibly could so that they can continue to do the great work that they do? How do you communicate with your home office employees to keep everybody from panicking and worrying? Everybody has questions. The board wonders, what are the company financials going to look like? Employees wonder if they're going to have a job. The field wonders, what are you going to do to better support us through this tough time? And it forced us to really coalesce as a team. Couldn't be prouder of the team. We talk about a team in sports and you wonder if your leadership team is really a team. I can tell you ours is. And it was great to see those folks come together. And it was a time when you had to pull on everybody's expertise, everybody's knowledge, everybody's insight, because nobody had the answers. And we all knew that. And so we really had to work together to chart a course that was going to make the most sense for our company and our clients.
A couple things that really stood out from your answer there. One is you drilled down on the idea that to manage that incredible shift, communication was key. We talked about that earlier. It's how you communicate, it's how you communicate individually, not just generically, that allows people to gain confidence, feel comfort, and know they're in the right place. So I love that lesson and how that's taught there. But you also made reference to a question we've asked almost every guest because we find it so powerful. A lot of organizations love to refer to their collective as a team. But the truth is, there are a bunch of independent contractors who all have their own agendas. They just happen to have the same business card.
Right.
You've obviously participated in some good teams. You've obviously participated in some that were 11 and 14. But what advice do you give to someone that's trying to bridge that gap, that's trying to take a group of free agents and get them to commit? What are some of the things they have to do to become a solid, well-knit team?
The word that immediately comes to mind, Don, is fit. Do you have people that fit on your team? And what I've learned through my career, and especially since I've gotten to First Command, where our primary market is the military, and you learn to understand the military better and you really appreciate the sacrifices they make for all of us. This idea of selfless service, contributing to a cause bigger than yourself. I mean, it's so embedded in our military. First thing you have to have is you've got to have a clear mission that is compelling and meaningful, that people want to aspire to. It can't just be about how much money am I making? What kind of control do I have? How many people are in my org chart? Those sorts of things. Yes, you want revenue to go up. You want profitability to go up. You want all these metrics to grow, but that should be an outcome of all the work that you do. It shouldn't be the driving force. And for us, it's that mission and our vision that we have as a company. And what brings that to life for us is really our core values. And I know if not all companies have them, most companies have them. And
for most of them, they're just a poster on the wall.
Yeah. A lot of times they're just words, right? Words on a page. And one of the things I really enjoy about First Command is we don't necessarily talk about the core values a lot, but I see them in action all the time. So I really feel that our people live by those core values. Ours are courage, love, and effectiveness. Those are the three. And I can tell you without a doubt that anytime we're facing a big or important decision, we will always take a look at those three core values and say, is this in line with those core values? If it's not, then it's not the right decision. Because clients, employees, board of directors, you name it, if you're not consistent, they're going to feel it. it's not going to be authentic, and you're not going to be as effective if you don't stay true to yourself and have that genuine approach, that authentic approach. And then you've got to communicate the heck out of it. It gets great enthusiasm and buy-in and passion on the front end. And I think it prevents a whole lot of problems on the back end if you get people bought into what it is you're trying to accomplish together.
I've probably interviewed hundreds of executives over time, and I've talked to a lot of them about core values and stated missions and things like that. But I can think of very few that would ever have love, especially among three core values, right? I mean, it's not like you have 25 and you're trying to match the L letter in the alphabet, or so you throw love in there. Love is a core value. Give it to me.
You throw the love word in a core value, and a lot of us were sort of choking on that word. Like, can we really use the word love? But we thought about a couple of things. And when we got comfortable with these thoughts, there was not a better word. You look at the love that the military and the brothers and sisters have for each other, and it's really
Huh.
looking out for their own good. And love for each other's good, right? It's not about yourself, it's about taking care of the person to the left and to the right of you. And for us, we define love as putting others' good ahead of our own, which for us as a company says our clients and our market has to come first. And we're big believers if we continue to put our clients first, our field force, our employees, and our company are going to be just fine. And that's what we continue to find. So it wasn't an easy word. And now that it's in there, we've all gotten a lot more comfortable with it. But it was the one that got the most debate, I can tell you.
When you said it, I loved it. And I'm grateful that you helped explain it. One of the things that really stood out to me was, and you referenced it just last year, you became CEO. You credit your predecessor, Scott Spiker, for handling the leadership transition so well. Can you tell me about what that mentorship and that leadership transition preparation looked like in the organization?
It was critical. And we sort of have a running joke, Scott, myself, and our head of HR, Jill Little. It might have been the longest running, grueling development plan anybody's ever gone through. But I have to give Scott a tremendous amount of credit. I've never seen a CEO transition like the one he led. We did have a development plan for me that we wrote. It was very specific, very detailed, covered a number of different areas. Scott wanted to be sure I was as well rounded, as experienced, as informed as I could possibly be stepping into the role. He and our head of HR and I would meet monthly. We would just order dinner in and we'd sit at his conference room table and spend 2 or 3 hours together, crawling through it, make sure we were making good progress. He was great about communicating to the right groups at the right time. So he let the board of directors know early on his intentions to step down. Him stepping down from the CEO role was completely his decision. He was doing a great job leading us, but 13 years as a CEO, 9 at the time, he said, hey, the shelf life of a CEO isn't typically 10 or 15 years. And
Right.
he recognized that there's a time when you need some change, and nobody forced him to that. He came to his own conclusion. And communication is critical because it not only allowed me to be prepared as he communicated to the board and then ultimately to our executive leadership team and others, everything's out in the open.
Mm.
There's complete transparency, there's complete openness. It allows others to sort of circle around you and become supportive as opposed to trying to operate in secret when you're trying to hide all this stuff. It keeps all the rumors from flying around who's going to be our next CEO. It stops all the infighting that sometimes you find when different individuals are vying for the same leadership role within an organization. And I got to tell you, the word that comes to mind with Scott through all this was selfless. He put the company's success ahead of his own personal gain. He brought me into everything. He shared everything with me. And in the October, November to December of 2019 timeframe, I remember being asked by board members and our head of HR, like, are you worried or nervous or concerned about becoming the CEO? I wasn't concerned at all. And I don't mean to be arrogant or cocky on this, but I was as prepared as I could possibly be walking into that role. And I have Scott to thank for that. And thank goodness he did, because the added benefit of that, not only was it the transition as seamless as I think it could have been, when the pandemic hit in March of 20, I'd learned as much about the company as I could possibly learn. So I had that in hand already, and it allowed myself and our leadership team to turn our attention towards the issue at hand, the pandemic. So I wasn't coming up this steep CEO learning curve.
Right.
I'd had 4 years of coming up the learning curve, thanks to Scott. Then when the pandemic hit, we can focus on the real issue and leading our way through this pandemic. So it had a lot of benefits. We could tell in January, February, real smooth transition. We didn't realize how big those benefits were going to be until the pandemic hit.
I love that. Couple things. Number one, I mean, a 4-year window on a transition. That's incredible. Like, I mean, I can probably count on one hand the number of organizations where you have essentially a coach in waiting, if you will,
Yeah.
that's 4 years in the making. What a great gift. And obviously that's credit not just to Scott, but also to the board and the structure there. So you had a plan that allowed you to grow through those 4 years and allowed everyone else to feel comfortable that you were doing that. But secondly, I love the idea that you took time outside of the workday to order dinner in. And, sometimes those windows were when maybe some of the most important conversations were going to occur.
Yeah, and it's just another example of time is a valuable commodity for all of us. We've got work commitments, we've got family commitments, we've got lives we would like to lead outside of those things as well. And to take that time once a month, and it would typically last, 2, 3 hours, whatever time we needed, but to take yourself out of the fray of the day, the emails that are flying in, the phone calls, the interruptions, and really just sit down and have a conversation. It wasn't an intense grilling. It was just, hey, how's this coming? Where are you feeling comfortable? Where do we still need to do more work? Are we getting through this like we thought? What adjustments do we need to make to this development plan? Because we made a lot of adjustments along the way. You set a course 4 years prior, you're going to make adjustments along the way. But it was some of the most valuable time I've ever spent in my career. They weren't all fun, I can tell you that. There were some courageous conversations they needed to have with me around, hey, you might have messed this one up, or you probably could do better at this. And to their credit, they didn't shy away from those conversations. And hearing that kind of constructive feedback isn't always the easiest thing.
Right.
If you want to give me constructive feedback, and it's really just to make yourself feel better because you want to kind of dump your anger and emotion on me, I've found myself, I'm usually not really receptive to that. But when it's being delivered because they care and they really are looking out for your success and the company's success,
You're going to take that.
you have to be open to that
Right.
because it's coming from a good place, right? And I tried to be as open as I could to their feedback and react to it and adjust. And that was another gift. And to have that time and that kind of feedback and the ability to make the necessary adjustments before I got officially into the role was huge.
Boy, amazing. And that obviously allowed you to even manage something as difficult as a pandemic.
Yeah.
You talked about time constraints and the challenge. You also, in addition to all that you're doing there, you have 5 kids.
Yes.
And I know that an important part of your life is actually even coaching some of their teams. Tell me what you've learned as a coach for your children's athletic teams that's been impactful to you and your journey as a leader.
We coach a lot of great kids, a lot of talented kids. Fortunately, our kids are the same. They're smart, they're athletic, they're talented. But very few people are going to succeed on talent alone. And that's something we've tried to instill not only in our own kids, but in all the kids that we've coached, that it's going to take something beyond talent. It's great that you have it, but how do you maximize that? And how do you really differentiate yourself? And how do you push that forward? That's through hard work. That's through preparation. Coaching football in Texas, even Little League football, I'm embarrassed to tell you how many hours of film 6th grade Little League football coaches in Texas will watch in preparation for next week's game.
That is crazy.
But that preparation is critical. There's a quote by Colonel David Duckworth that I think about quite often. If you find yourself in a fair fight, you haven't planned your mission properly.
Oh, I got to go find that quote. I love that.
Yeah. And that's how we approach sports. And that's how I think our leadership team approaches the work we're doing as well. The execution should be fun, right? Playing the game should be fun. Executing your plan, hopefully, is fun. And of course, it's going to come with challenges. Train like you fight. And you hear that a lot from our military members. The training should be harder than the fighting. Preparation should be harder than the game because you go into those games or you go into your situations as prepared as you can be. Now, the good news with sports, obviously, is you might have a week to prepare. In business, you might have 1 minute to prepare, right? So it's a different depending on the situation. So you've got to be quicker and more nimble in a business environment, I think. But we like to go in prepared. We like to do our homework and our preparation ahead of time so that you get fewer surprises when it comes time to execute.
I love it. Game film for sixth grade
It's
football.
crazy.
Now I know exactly how things truly are bigger in Texas.
Yeah, I'd like to say it started in sixth grade, but honestly, it was the whole time.
Love it. You've made several references to the idea that First Command provides financial services to military families. And as CEO, you outwardly use sporting metaphors quite often in the office to explain your mission and to emphasize the need for a coach in financial planning. You want these service members, the people you serve, to recognize that your job is to actually come in and help coach them into that aspect of their life. When you think about coaching, how do you look at that term as it refers to what you believe and you do today? And how does that connect to the coaches you've learned from over the years?
Coaching is critical to what we do. In fact, it's so important. It's actually in our mission statement. Our company mission statement is coaching those who serve in their pursuit of financial security. And the most operative word in that statement is coaching, because for us and the work our advisors do, it's all about behavior change.
Hmm.
Folks in the military, it's the same pay scale. Everybody gets this. If you're in a certain rank, you get a certain pay, and there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? They're not going to suddenly, in most cases, find this wealth. So we have to help them understand how to manage their money better than they have in the past. And a lot of that is all about behavior change, because it's not a huge pay raise that's coming. We know that folks in the military didn't get in the military to be rich, but they shouldn't have to be poor either.
Right.
What we really try to do is to sit down with them and help them first understanding their budget and how to spend their money more appropriately. Think back to our education system. In high school, through a home ec course, they taught me how to bake a cake. Nobody taught me about finances. And I can't tell you the last time I baked a cake, but I have to deal with our finances every day, especially with 5 kids. So that knowledge is void in most people, and certainly most people in the military. And with deployments, with ops tempos, with all sorts of things that the military has to deal with, not only do they not have the training to deal with finances in most cases, they don't have the time to deal with their finances. And they always often think, hey, we don't have the money, we can't afford this, we can't do this, we can't do that. And if you can help them understand how their finances work and where their money is going, a lot of times just some simple budgeting work will make a big difference. It's the behavior change. It's helping them understand and implement sound financial behaviors. Sort of like if you go back to sports, it's the fundamentals, right? I mean, I honestly believe our high school team is effective as it is because our kids start learning the fundamentals literally in first, second, or third grade. And some of the things they learned back then are things that are still using today at the varsity level, or even when they go into college. Finances are the same way. You've got to build those fundamentals. You've got to build those basics, and you can't build more complex stuff on top of it until you've got the solid foundation from which to build. And if you can get people to understand the finances and exercise the right behaviors, it can make a world of difference.
Right.
Similar to coaching. A lot of time with coaching, I don't think it's a massive change to what you're doing. A lot of times it's a tweak here, a nudge there, right? It's this little incremental stuff. Add up 3, 4, or 5 of those incremental changes, and suddenly you're in a completely different place.
I love that. And you're right. That constant willingness to grow, to iterate, and to encourage others to grow and iterate with you. I mean, that's, I think, really important. Sports, much like finance, are ever changing, providing new learning opportunities. You discussed several of those even during film sessions, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But how do you encourage your team at First Command to continue to grow and develop individually?
It's almost a group dynamic at this point, and I think we've all kind of taken on that responsibility. With as fast as the world is changing today, and then you compound that with the issues we faced for the last 15 months, it's forced us all to stay current, right? To read as much as we can, to observe as much as we can. I don't end up reading a lot of books because with everything we're going through and 5 kids, you don't find a lot of time for that. But
As an author, I won't take that at all personally.
yeah, exactly.
So you are keeping my kids from going to college. That's cool. Thank you.
But I'm reading stuff every day, and I look at what other companies are doing. I look at what other CEOs are doing. We look at industry trends, and all of our executive leadership team has sort of taken on the responsibility for their respective areas to stay current and kind of trying to keep an eye on the overall climate or the overall situation as well. And we meet every week as an executive leadership team. We've got monthly strategic meetings and some other offsite work that we do. And those are all the discussions. We'll bring in consultants where we need to and where that's going to be beneficial to us. But it's kind of this ongoing learning process. And we've all embraced the fact that just because you get to an executive or senior leadership position, that's not the time to stop growing. You've got to stay sharp and really stay in tune with the world around you, because the minute the rate of change in the outside world exceeds the rate of change inside, the end is near, and we don't want to be left behind or become irrelevant.
That's really powerful. Now, when you're studying, when you're reading, when you're learning, when you're not reading books, when you're doing those things, are you just focused on what's happening in your industry, or are you also studying other industries and what other high performing organizations are doing?
We look beyond our industry because I think you can learn a lot of lessons. And if you look at the app your company might have, our clients aren't just comparing the First Command app to other financial services providers' apps. They're comparing the experience they get with us to the experience they get with every other provider that they have, whether it's Uber or Amazon or you name it. People are looking for better client experiences these days, and we have to deliver, like every company, the best client experience we possibly can. All the solutions, all the great ideas, all the different opportunities, you're not going to find them all in financial services. A lot of companies have a lot of great ideas, but you've got to be willing to learn from other industries and other perspectives and see if there's a way to incorporate those types of things or maybe a slightly modified version of those things into your business plan. So we try to keep a real broad perspective and look at what's happening and see if there is a way or a need or an opportunity to incorporate some of these additional thoughts into the work we're doing.
I know how important listening is in creating great relationships. We've talked about the importance of relationships and how you build them. Who is the best listener you've ever encountered? Someone who is just, you watch the way they were letting their wheels turn to listen as opposed to craft an answer. Is there someone who maybe has modeled that well for you over time?
Absolutely. When I first got into this business 30 years ago, there was a guy that led the department I worked in. He ended up going to a different company. And fortunately, he ultimately ended up asking me to join him at the next company. And I did, in part because I had such respect for him and his knowledge of the business. Even at a young age, what stuck out with him was listening. And it really came to play when somebody came in and they were trying to pitch him on an idea or encourage him to maybe take a different direction. The topic might be completely foreign to him. Might have had exposure to it, he might not have. But he would ask question after question, not because he was trying to micromanage folks, but because he was really seeking to understand. And what was just as impressive, while he's asking these questions, you would never know which way he was leaning. It really seemed like he
Mm,
was just trying to take it in and not trying to just confirm a decision he'd already made, right? Like this kind of knee jerk reaction. Ask question, ask questions, get the answers, pull all that together. And then once he felt that he understood kind of the what's and the whys of whatever the initiative was, then he'd make a decision. And it didn't take him long to make a decision. He wouldn't go away for 2 weeks. I mean, he oftentimes would do it kind of right there on the spot. But it wasn't this immediate answer or an uninformed answer. It was a really great example. And I try as best I can to emulate that today to really prevent myself, because so many of us are high execute. We just want to get the job done. And sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't work out as well. And maybe a few more questions or, a little bit of more research would have been a good thing. But I really try to discipline myself to be a good listener, a good asker of questions, to get as comfortable with the idea as the person presenting the idea is. And a lot of times I'll agree because it makes sense. And sometimes you end up not agreeing and looking for a different approach. But it all came through that learning process of asking questions and listening. And he still today serves as a great example to me for that.
I love that. There was such an important part of the way he asked questions. He wasn't asking questions that were intended to lead you to a place.
Nope.
He was asking questions. You use the phrase from Stephen Covey, seek to understand. What a powerful and impactful opportunity that was. I've spent 30 years doing this in journalism, talking to high performers around if they have a habit, something that has been an aspect of their daily regimen that they believe plays into their ability to stay excellent as long as possible. Is there a habit for you that you try to make sure and remind yourself every day to execute on?
It's maybe a combination of things. One is just pure hard work. staying focused and dedicated.
It's the rebounder, baby.
It's the rebounder, right? And I come from a blue collar family. My dad was it still is a mechanic, and 79 years old. He still works. And my mom was a secretary, but they instilled a solid work ethic into us. And what I try never to forget is where you came from.
I love it. Mark, I cannot thank you for the time today. Cannot thank you for the stories, the lessons. There's so much greatness to be learned in what you all are doing, especially there at First Command. So powerful. And who you're doing it for, so powerful. Thank you today for being a corporate competitor.
It's absolutely my pleasure. It was an honor to be here. And I want to thank you for your time, Don. Thank you for having me.
Looking back at my notes, I want to emphasize Mark's 3 keys to a seamless leadership transition. First, it is not accidental. Schedule time and create a system to take notes so that you can refer back to them later. Second, include training outside of the 4 walls of your office. Maybe grab dinner or walk a job site. And third, be transparent in everything you do. If you enjoyed this conversation, you will love episode 32 with former Blue Angel pilot Keith Hoskins. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir.
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.